So the first step in applying to do a PhD, obviously, is finding out which funded PhD you want to do. I'm assuming that your preference is to do a PhD where you get funding as well, because most people aren't in the position of being able to fund themselves. So it's quite important to ask yourself some fairly basic questions, such as what do you want? Do you want to apply to a ready-made project that a supervisor has put together? Or do you prefer the idea of creating your own research project? I suppose, as touched on in the previous session, one of the dangers of applying to a ready-made project can be that you end up doing the grunt work for a supervisor, whose project design it was. Of course, that's not always the case, but it is something to consider. So if you are going to apply to a ready-made project, do make sure you really familiarize yourself with what is required of that project. What are the research methods? What will you be doing day by day in that project? Are you going to be analyzing endless samples in the lab? Are you going to be collecting your own samples? Are you going to be out in the field? Are you going to be modeling? Really get it clear in your mind what that project is going to be. If you're designing your own project, then obviously you can lay those parameters all out in advance. So if you are looking for a funded project, you can, and there are, as I mentioned before, so there are multiple different research councils, and they all have doctoral training partnerships, and those doctoral training partnerships mostly recruit to ready-made projects. So you can find your way to all those different research councils and DTPs via the UKRI main website. So the link is here, and obviously these slides will be made available to you. You can also go to university department websites. So from this year, we no longer advertise projects on the DTP website. It caused a lot of confusion with people not being able to sort of distinguish between going projects and streams and things like that. And in fact, there was then a lot of duplication between department websites and our websites. And updating things is always difficult when you've got things in two different places. So from this year, all standard projects are advertised on the department websites. And this is also a good place to find out about supervisors, because there are a lot more supervisors in department websites than there are on our website. And you can apply to work with a supervisor who is not featured on our website. As long as they're within Oxford as the primary, that's fine. The supervisors on our website are just people who have opted in to being on our website, but they're not 100% of supervisors eligible to be on the DTP. So do visit department websites, do your research. There's also Find a PhD. Now, we personally don't advertise on Find a PhD. We did for many years, and we found that it wasn't a brilliant route in to our DTP. So I don't think we got many applications from it, but I know most DTPs do advertise on here. So visit findaphd.com. They have a website, got a YouTube channel, Facebook, Twitter, all the normal things. So once you've decided what you want to do, you need to prepare to apply. And I would say, as David mentioned earlier, don't just apply to, and I'm sure none of you are going to do this, don't just apply to one university for one thing. Apply to several. I'm not going to say scattergun, don't do that, because then that in itself becomes very obvious when you're doing that. But definitely apply to a handful. Oxford, I think, is the only place at the moment that has an application fee, so it shouldn't cost you anything to apply to others. And I think as of next year, hopefully, fingers crossed, they will finally be getting rid of the application fee. So do your research, visit the course page on the main university website. The Oxford website has at the top, there's a bar that says admissions. If you click on that, you get undergraduate and graduate. If you select graduate, you'll go through to the graduate admissions page, and there's tons of information there. There's a course finder, and then there's also lots of supporting information for applicants, and there's a link to the application form, information about fees and funding, there's a scholarship search. So it takes a while to wade through it, I'm not going to lie, but it is really worth taking time to do your research, visit all those pages, and inform yourself about what's available and what the process is. So this is the link to the a direct link to where you can find the course pages. And if you go to this link, you would just type in environmental research and you can go straight to our page, which also has very detailed information on how to apply to our programme. Visit department websites. Every department will have its own how to apply information. As you've already guessed, different programs of study. So like we're one program of study, the DPhil in biology would be another program of study. They have different application requirements. So we don't ask for a research proposal, but biology does. So you need to check very carefully on the specific how to apply information if you are going to do more than one application to us. And by the way, if you apply to the DTP, you can apply to a DPhil in any of our departments without paying an additional application fee. It's just a one fee. And that is our application, our how to apply link. You can also navigate there by just going to our homepage, and the email that you got from me to send you the link to this has a link to our homepage. And there's lots of other stuff there as well, such as, in fact, I wanted to chuck this in somewhere. If you go to our website and you go to the training section, in there you'll see there's a link to our course handbook, which has stacks of stuff like, the first term timetable, the induction timetable, key contacts, information about all the different courses that are on offer, and that sort of thing. So you will find that really useful to look at before you start an application. So yeah, read through it all. Allow yourself a week or two to wade through everything before you really apply, and then start your application well in advance. So our deadline is early January. So if you were to start your application round about now, you'll give yourself plenty of time to do all of this preparation. There's very supporting documentation that we ask for as part of the application. Once you're ready to start it, you'll find a link to the application form, again, from our course page on the main university website. And after this session, we'll have someone from graduate admissions coming along to actually walk you through that application form, so it's familiar to you when you start. There's a number of things that form part of that application, as well as just filling in the form. So the first thing is a CV. As of this year, that's part of the application form. You don't have to fill that in separately and then upload it, which is what's happened previously. So that's an improvement. That's, of course, a template. Everyone's CV will look identical. So that hopefully means that will eliminate a certain amount of bias towards people that have got really swanky CVs. They'll all look equally rubbish as of now. The statement of purpose is a 500-word essay. It's not really an essay. It's a sort of a composition. So not numbered paragraphs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 according to the suggested topics, but just try and make it a sort of unified composition of about 500 words. At the top of the statement of purpose, that's where we'd like you to put the 3 suggested assessors / reviewers, the departmental assessors. Those don't form part of the word count. And there's very full instructions on how to complete the statement of purpose on that main university course page, how to apply section. There is a form that graduate admissions hold, where they ask you to complete your socioeconomic data. All applicants do this, and it's very important for us, partly for monitoring purposes, but also for identifying people that might be eligible for particular scholarships, such as the Academic Futures and the Black Academic Futures, and various other scholarships like that. So it's important to complete that. The contextual statement has been mentioned. This is over and above the statement of purpose, and this is particularly relevant for candidates who have experienced particular challenges during their educational career or during their childhoods, things which may have held them back or caused just particular obstacles that they've had to overcome, which can actually lead to a lot of transferable skills being developed in your life, such as if you had to work to see yourself through a degree, which most people do now, that gives you a lot of resilience, time management skills. You have to be quite organized to do that. And it also shows immense determination and motivation. So these are all really relevant things to know about. We no longer require a piece of written work. So this used to be called a sort of research proposal. It was also 500 words. But again, to try and level the playing field between people that have close contacts with supervisors already and people who don't, we no longer require this piece of written work, so you don't have to worry about that. And then the final thing is references. As touched on, we ask for 3 references. It says 2 of these should be academic. But obviously, if you're a mature student and it's been quite a long time since you're in academia, maybe you could do 1 academic referee and 2 professional referees. But they should be people that know you well, and that can really, talk about your strengths and what makes you a good fit for the programme. We have had employer references that have just said this person worked for us between this date and this date, and really, then they're not helpful for you. So please do make sure that your referee knows that we need some detail about why you're so great. There's one other thing I was thinking of just then, but my mind's gone a bit blank. Maybe it will come back to me. So this is the timeline for the assessment process, and hopefully I've updated all of this correctly. But this year our application deadline is on the 5th of January, and that should be 2024. Sorry, I did this yesterday. These are 2024 dates, but I've put 2023 at the end, I've just realised. So it's the 5th of January 2024 is the application deadline. We then take 3 weeks, that's me, and I will have some administrative help to go through every single application to ensure that it's been correctly anonymised. This was the thing I was going to say about referees. Please ask them to submit anonymised references. They will be requested to do that, but sometimes they don't bother. If they don't bother, that won't disadvantage you. We will just have to redact it manually. So it saves us a lot of time if referees are willing to submit anonymous references. But again, so we go through all the applications, we make sure they're all properly redacted so that there's all a level playing field. Once that's done, a 2-week assessment period starts. Now, this is the period when each application is reviewed by 3 academic assessors. 2 of them will be academics who were on our management committee. And so 3 of the panelists you met today are on our management committee, and they do this every year. So the management committee members, they'll review 1 application that's destined for their department, and we can usually tell. If it's not obvious, we can usually tell. They'll also assess an application potentially for a different department, because we try and ensure they all have an even number of applications to review. Biodiversity, the biodiversity stream has by far the largest number of applications. So of course, if those poor biodiversity committee members had to do all of them, they'd be here till May. So we spread the applications out evenly. Each one is reviewed by 2 management committee people, and the third assessor is a departmental assessor, and that will be one of the people that you listed on your statement of purpose. So, and that's why they shouldn't be a potential supervisor, because that's obviously going to be a conflict of interest. But we will consult your proposed supervisor, if you have one, and just check whether or not you've been in touch with them and would they be willing to supervise you. So that's another good reason why you should get in touch with potential supervisors. Getting in touch with a supervisor is not a commitment to work with that supervisor. I really hope we've made that clear. It just shows that you are doing the legwork, you're doing the research, and you're talking about possible research ideas. So it's a really, really important thing to do. After the 2-week assessment period, that's when we hold a shortlisting meeting. This usually goes on for about 3 or 4 hours as we go through all of the applications. Applications are banded by the assessors. This means they're given a banding. So they'll be given like a green or an amber or a red banding. They're not ranked in order. So we will look at the banded candidates and we will decide which candidates are going to go forward to interview. That's the shortlisting process. The contextual data is really important during this process because that will affect, sometimes it could move someone in the amber band up into the green band if we've seen the kind of challenges that they've had to face to get where they are today. We could be like, okay, so this person has not had the benefit of X, Y, Z. We're going to move them up into the green band and we're going to interview them. Invites to interview will go out the next working day from the shortlisting meeting. So it's 9th of Feb next year is the shortlisting meeting. That's a Friday. So invites to interview will go out on Monday, the 11th of February next year. And interviews are 1 week later, on the 19th and 20th of February, 2024, that is. So after the interviews, which as we went through a little bit about the interviews, everyone that's invited for interview will be invited to participate in a kind of briefing, a pre-interview briefing session with David Marshall, who will go through lots of things like the format the interviews will take, the types of questions you'll be asked. There'll be a Q&A there so you can ask about anything that is concerning you, or that's, that's obviously it's going to be a nerve-wracking thing, but we'll do our best to prepare you and to make sure that you're as unnervous as you can possibly be. So there'll be a couple of the opportunities to attend those briefings before the interviews happen. The interviews themselves usually take about 20 minutes each. They're very quick. They're online and they are mostly really just a chat about stuff you love talking about anyway. So I often hear from students that make it through how actually they quite enjoyed their interviews in the end, even though they were nervous to start with. They actually found them quite enjoyable because they weren't being tested and they weren't being tricked. They were just being given the chance to talk about stuff that they really are passionate about. The decisions meeting will be on the 22nd February, and we will inform everyone who's got an offer within a day or two of that meeting. And then we'll inform everyone who's on the waiting list, and then we'll inform people who haven't been successful. The waiting list, as we've already said, it always comprises people that we would have given an offer to if we had the money. So being on the waiting list, it's not quite as good as getting an offer, obviously, but it is not a rejection. So I often get candidates saying, why wasn't I good enough to get an offer? What is this waiting list thing? And we're like, honestly, if you're on the waiting list, it's because you're incredible. We just wish we had enough money to fund everybody. So we'll keep you on the waiting list as we work through whether the candidates that might not want to accept our offer, maybe they want to go somewhere else. And then as soon as that happens, we'll invite somebody on the waiting list. And that we will keep that running throughout the summer, because sometimes people get opportunities much later. They might get an offer a month further down the line, and then they might come back to us and say, actually, you know what, I don't want to accept my offer from you. At which point we're obviously disappointed to lose them to somewhere else, but we're also delighted that we can offer a place to someone on the waiting list who's keen and hopeful. Once you've got an offer, all offers come with conditions. And even if you've already got your results, the condition will just be producing the evidence of those results. Now, you may have already uploaded that to your application, but to meet your conditions for an offer, we have to see either an original transcript, or we have to have a certified electronic copy direct from your institution, not sent via you. So we need you to reshare those documents with us after the point of offer in a more official kind of capacity. And the deadline for meeting conditions is the 31st of August. The assessment process in a department is slightly different. Many of you will also be applying to departments, and so obviously you'll have done a separate form for your department. I'm not really aware of this box ticking thing. You may be able to do that, but you probably also have to provide the relevant supporting documentation, such as a research proposal, if that's required by that department. So once you've organised all that with the department, usually what they'll do is send the application to the relevant supervisor, because you will almost always have to specify the supervisor you want to work with on a departmental application. You don't have to do that for us. So they'll send your application to the supervisor that you've specified, and they will assess your application on their own. They will decide if they want to interview you. There will be an interview panel. If they do, the interview panel will be only interviewing you. It will be specific to you, and then they will decide if there's an offer or no offer after that point. So this is an example, and you probably can't read this on the shared screen because it is tiny, but I will share the slides. This is the example of the letter that we will send to students who we want to invite for an interview. It tells you the date and the time, the fact that it will take place on Teams. It will give you a link to a session, like a pre-interview briefing session. It will give you a little bit of information about the types of questions you'll be asked in the interview, and it will ask you to let us know of any reasonable adjustments that we should be making. If you have a disability, or if you have a neurodivergence or anything like that, that we need to be aware of, so that we can make that interview go better for you. So I'll let you read through that at your leisure. And that is pretty much everything I wanted to say about the step-by-step process. So what I will do now, if I just unshare my screen. Oh, I'm not unsharing, am I? So I've lost my cursor. There we go. Right, so here I am. I will have a quick look at the Q&A now and see if there are any questions about the application process. Right, I'm going to work my way Excuse me, I'm just going to scroll up to the top of where I think the questions are for the session. Here we go. So are scholarships considered as academic achievements? Yes, they are. You can put those on your CV. There'll be a place for those in the CV template, as well as any prestigious sporting achievements, if you think those are relevant to your application. Should the CV be in bullet point form? Well, it's a template on the form. You will fill in fields in the CV template on the form, and I think Charlie will probably show you that as part of his walkthrough. But you'll have very little ability to make that CV look pretty or whatever. You will just fill in specific fields on a form, so it's exactly the same for everybody. Dual sports student career should be declared as a contextual statement. I mean, does that mean that you've been doing a sporting career and being a student at the same time? I'm not sure that would count as a sort of a disadvantage or an obstacle, but if you think it is, put it in a contextual statement, and we will have a look at that, and we'll make that judgment. But it's always better to have more information than less. So if there's an option to provide us with information that you think will support your application, please do. Will I be informed if I'm rejected? Yes, the week after we inform successful candidates first, and then we move on to unsuccessful candidates. But everybody will get a contact from us to let them know the outcome of their application process and to thank them for participating in it. We won't. It says, are we going to receive the result of our application earlier if we submitted in the first or second week? No, we only assess applications after the application deadline. We assess them all together as a gathered field, so that everybody is considered at the same time and by the same people. It's just fairer that way. So yeah, there's no particular advantage to submitting early. But by that token, don't leave it until the submission deadline to submit, because everybody will be submitting on the 5th of January. So if you can get your application in a couple of days before the application deadline, then you can breathe a sigh of relief knowing that it's safe with us. We have had cases where the system has just crashed because so many people were trying to submit at 11:59 on Friday. On the application deadline, and the deadline is midday, by the way, on that day, so you have to get it in before midday on the 5th of January. So can you please clarify about anonymous reference? It's part of our pilot to try and eliminate unconscious bias from the application process. So all applications are anonymized, and that includes references. And it just is a lot simpler for us if referees can submit their references already anonymized. So they don't mention your name, they say they or them or your applicant number instead of he or she. And they just try and not put anything in there that could identify you personally. How many people will be invited for interviews? The interviews happen over 2 days. The most really we can interview in a day is 12. But occasionally we might squeeze in 13 if it's really close. So I would say between 20 and 26 probably. Are applicants not shortlisted for interview? Amber red bands informed. All applicants will be informed at some point. Because of the sheer volume of work, it might not be possible to inform candidates that have not been shortlisted straight away, excuse me, but we do try to. So we normally do 2 waves of contacts for unsuccessful candidates. We'll do one prior to interview for those who haven't been shortlisted, and then we'll do one post-interview for those that were interviewed but weren't successful. If we get into the waiting list and we somehow manage to get some funding, maybe from our own country, are we going to be accepted? Potentially. It depends on the source of funding. If you manage to get sponsorship, say from a company or something like that, that could enable us to give you an offer at that point, yes. If it's funding from family, friends, or your own personal money, we can't accept that, because we have to ensure that the candidates and their families are not potentially impoverishing themselves, taking out loans, or having to work long hours to pay off loans, things like that. So we can't take personal money, but we can accept scholarships from companies or from governments, or things like that. Could I repeat the date? The panel will decide if offers are given or not. So the decisions meeting will be on the 22nd of February. And all of these dates will be should be on our how to apply page now, but if not, I'll update them with this level of granularity so that people know the timeline. For conditions of offer, is it possible to have condition as existing master to be distinction? That wouldn't be one of our conditions. Well, either if you've got already got your bachelor's degree, we will ask for evidence of that bachelor's degree. If you've already got a master's degree, we'll ask for evidence of that master's degree. If you're currently doing your bachelor's degree, we will say you must achieve it with a minimum of a 2-1. And then you must also provide the evidence. And if you're currently doing your master's, we'll ask you for evidence of your bachelor's and then evidence of your master's when it's finished. But that won't be a condition of your offer, because that usually happens after the 31st of August. But we'll still need to see your master's certificate at some point, but that won't be a condition of your offer. So it's a slightly different scenario for each case. Could I explain what I mean by applying to a department? Yes. So you can apply to different parts of the university to carry out different PhDs, different PhD programs. If you apply to us, you're applying to the DTP in environmental research. You fill in an application form to us, and that offer that we give would come with the training program and the funding and everything. But you can also complete a separate application form and apply to the Department of Earth Sciences to do a DPhil in Earth Science. That would have nothing to do with the DTP whatsoever. That would be to do a PhD in that department. That might give you access to a departmental scholarship that's nothing to do with us. So that, because departments have their own funding, they don't have as much as we do, but they do have their own scholarships and they have their own projects. And so it's very often worth making 2 applications to Oxford, one to the DTP programme and one to the department programme. So I hope that's a bit clearer. In the Earth Science department, there are several projects labelled as DTP projects. So do they consider as case projects, or what's the difference? And if yes, should we use the project code, use the DTP code, right? Well, if it's in the Earth Science and it's on the web page, it's an Earth Sciences department, you are not applying to R81. That's a DTP application. You're applying to Earth Sciences. So do not use R81 if you're filling in an application form to the DPhil in Earth Science for a project on the Earth Science website. Where they say it's a DTP project, what they mean is that project is within the NERC remit. And therefore, could be used, or you could apply to the DTP with that project in mind. So you could apply to us and you would be able to do that project in earth sciences. But if you apply to us, you're not applying to that project. So I know this is slightly complicated and I feel like I've made it worse. But a DTP project just means that project's within the NERC remit and it would be acceptable for a DTP student to do that project. I hope that's a bit clearer. What should we do in the case where the DTP has DPhil eligibility criteria that differ from that of one of the partnering departments, e.g. geography? Well, if you're applying to us, we don't really bother what a departmental requirement is. You're applying to us. Once you get a place with us, then you can carry out your project in geography. You've already got your place, and that's that, so that's fine. Hopefully that answers that question. Interested in a case project, but would also like to be considered for a non-case project that I would propose within the DTP. I would say, how do I indicate that in my application? I would say apply to the case project, please. We really need case students. We have a NERC requirement for case, and so we're really keen to get students applying to case projects. It's absolutely fine to have other projects in mind. You can move once you get here. We've already, explained that we're very flexible. And of course, several people might be applying to that case project. So it's a pretty good idea to have another idea in your back pocket in case a different student gets that case project. And then at least you've got something else to move on to. So you can pop that in your statement of purpose, if you like. That seems like a pretty good place to put it. Can we name a potential supervisor who is not listed on the DTP website? Yes, you can. We have lots of supervisors who haven't yet completed the profile page template for our website. The supervisors featured on our website have made a conscious decision to be promoted through our website, but they're not all the supervisors that are eligible to supervise with us. There are lots of supervisors in departments who are not on our website. So yes, as long as your primary supervisor is an Oxford academic, a faculty member usually, quite not an early careers researcher, but someone with a proper post, and they're in one of the 8 departments of the DTP, that's your primary supervisor. You can have secondary supervisors. They can be external to Oxford, or they can be in departments which are outside the DTP. That's all fine. But yes, you can have supervisors from other departments. What will happen if a department rejects the candidate who's got an offer from the DTP? If that happens, you've still got your offer from the DTP. So I think you're all good. You can still come to Oxford. We're not going to reject anyone who's been rejected from a different application. In fact, that happens quite often. We might reject somebody who gets an offer from a department, and that happens the other way around as well. And sometimes it happens because we've interviewed first and maybe the interview didn't go so well, and then the department interviews, and that interview goes much better because they've already had a practice session, or that can happen the other way around. But an offer is an offer. It's firm, and it's not going to be affected by if another application has been rejected. Oh, hi, Charlie. I'm just coming to the end of my Q&As at the moment. So I did my undergrad 10 years ago. Is a reference letter from my undergrad supervisor still useful? Yes, I think we need to have at least one academic reference. So we would, preferably 2, but if you've been out in the world and working, and academia is a long time ago, then I think we can just accept one academic reference. But yeah, we would definitely still need that. So could I clarify using master supervisors as potential reference providers when they may also supervise the DTP project? You can recommend, obviously this person knows you very well, they're likely to be able to give a nice detailed account of you and your fit for the programme. We will always feel that a potential supervisor has a bit of a vested interest, so that we might factor that into that reference. And that's why we ask for 3 different referees, so that we can get a balanced picture of who you are. But it's I would say quite appropriate for you to suggest that person as a referee. What can and can't be included on the contextual statement? Well, obviously this is going to be very personal to everybody's own personal circumstances. But for example, if you were a child carer, for example, you know, there are a lot of kids at school who have caring responsibilities, and that really impacts on their educational experience. It can teach a lot of, you know, transferable skills too early in life, one might say. But that's the sort of thing that would count. Or if the school you went to wasn't particularly sort of academic focused, I mean, maybe there wasn't a culture where schooling was prized by your peers, and maybe it wasn't seen as particularly cool to be into studies. That's the sort of thing that can really affect your progress in the school. So something like that. Having to work through your undergraduate degree. We know a lot of students have to put in long hours these days working to earn money to get through their bachelor's. That's the sort of thing that could be included. Having a disability. I mean, really, everybody's circumstances are so personal that it's not really a checkbox thing. And I would say, if you feel that you have had struggles, do the contextual statement and leave that with us. How much detail in terms of dates are required when reporting employment? Is month, year sufficient? Yes, that's absolutely fine. We don't need to know the exact date that you started or finished something. Deadline for referees to submit letters of recommendation. I believe, and I'm sure Charlie can correct me if I'm wrong, it's the same. Well, it actually can't be the same as the actual submission deadline. I think maybe there's a 2 or 3 day lag. Charlie, can you?
Hi. Yes. So in principle, the deadline is the same for referees as for the course application. So you can, when you register your referees, it will send out the notifications immediately. So you don't need to wait until you submitted your application. We do, in practice, give 2 extra working days to referees, but we don't want people to be kind of telling their referees that now, because then they'll take up the 2 days and then they'll want another 2 days because they've been suddenly tied up with stuff. So that 2 days is very much a last resort grace period rather than kind of normal practice. So yeah, make sure that if you're applying that for the January deadline, that you register your referees as soon as possible, so that they've got plenty of time in which to submit theirs ahead of that deadline.
Thanks, Charlie. That makes complete sense. And I think on some level I did know that. I just got a bit flustered in the moment by that question. What I'm going to do is, because we've hit 1:15. So I might actually, I suppose I could carry on. Were you going to start at 1:30 or 1:15, Charlie? I can't remember.
I was going to start at 1:30. I thought I would just sneakily listen into what you were saying beforehand.
Okay, that's fine. In that case, I'll just carry on working my way through these questions, knowing that you're on hand to jump in if I need you. So I imagine this is the case with many of us, but should we mention research projects that we were going to work on that got cancelled due to COVID? I think it's interesting to know about stuff that you had planned to do. It's not your fault you couldn't actually do it, but it does at least give an insight into your interests, and you can talk about the plans themselves, and what you can probably go into that in quite some detail, and all of that is quite useful for assessors to know what you had in mind, how you were going to how you were going to carry out your project and what methods you were going to use and who you were going to work with, and all of that all of that's interesting to know and could be helpful to them. I'm on a gap year. How can I best report future positions opportunities to demonstrate how they'll enrich my candidacy? I think if you can talk in your statement of purpose about things that you are aiming for in the future, that would be the ideal place to put information like that. Obviously, you only have about 500 words, and you might also want to focus a lot on things you've actually achieved as well, and to demonstrate skills that you've actually got. But you can certainly factor future aims and goals into your statement of purpose. So you already said in the previous session I can ask for an English test waiver, but I just want to make sure I can, as the application form is English language test waiver request are granted at the discretion of the academic department. So yes, the test waivers are granted by the admitting body. There are various circumstances under which we can grant a waiver, and one of them is if you have undertaken a degree in which the language, the medium of teaching, the language of teaching was English, and that can be within the UK or it can be abroad, as long as we can concretely verify that that course was definitely taught in English at that institution. And I think the minimum length of time for the course is 9 months, but I think they're usually about a year. So for a part-time MSc, that would be actually lasting longer than 9 months, I would say. And especially if you're living in the UK at that time, Charlie.
Yeah, so we say 9 months full time, but so if it was a part-time course, we'd say it'd have to be the full duration of that MSc would suffice.
And that has to be completed with 2 academic years of the start date of the course to which you're applying. So if it's longer than that, you may have to do an English language certificate, or if you've been living and working within the UK during that time, then that would also count. So we could still use that as an evidence. Should I include the gap year I had to take due to delay in my undergraduate graduation and a year late starting of my master's? I'm not sure what that means. Include the gap year in what context? Can you maybe type that in the Q's further down? If we don't receive an invitation to an interview on the 11th of February, can we consider it a rejection? I would say no to that, in case there's a delay sending out invites, or maybe something's gone into your junk email. So I would hold tight and wait for a day or two, and wait to be contacted by us. We aim to get all decisions pre and post interview out as soon as we possibly can. So just wait until you hear from us before you jump to any conclusions about what the outcome has been. And if you don't hear from me within, say, 2 or 3 days of that date, get in touch, because it may be that the email I've sent has gone astray or something like that. What if one of the referees just went to maternity and I'm not sure she will send the reference letter? It's an interesting one.
So you only need 2 of your registered referees to submit the reference letter for you to be considered ready for assessment. So as long as the other 2 did it, that would be fine. If the 3rd reference came in a little bit after the deadline, that wouldn't be a problem. It will still be added to the application, and the department gets notified if you already had 2 and are ready for assessment. You can, if you wish, register additional referees. You can, once you've submitted if you haven't yet submitted an application, and have registered 3 referees, and it does display a 4th slot for you if you wish to use it. Also, there are additional slots available if you use the self-service portal after submitting your application. So, if you feel there's someone else who can speak on behalf of that referee who is away, then that's an option.
Great, thank you, Charlie. And also you can email me directly if you're in a bit of a quandary and you don't know what to do, and I'm sure we can find a way to help you. Will I be disadvantaged if my referee doesn't submit an anonymised letter? No, because we will go through and we will redact anything that hasn't been anonymised before it gets to the assessors. So that's not your problem, that's our problem. Is there anything I should prepare if I get accepted for an interview? In the interview letter, you will be given a link to a pre-interview briefing with David Marshall, and he will go through a whole bunch of information to help you prepare for the interview and hopefully to calm your nerves. So there's nothing. It's at the point that you're invited is when you need to worry about that. And also you can review some of the earlier sessions with the assessors panel where they talk a bit about interviewing. So today's sessions will all be going up on our website. So I'd recommend going back to the assessors panel Q&A, because that's got lots of stuff in about interviews and do's and don'ts and things like that. Do we need supervisor letter acceptance for advertised projects? Do we have to write our own research proposal? You don't need a supervisor letter to show that you've been accepted onto a project to apply to us. You also don't have to write your own project proposal. That is open to you. But if you prefer to apply to do a project that's been designed for a supervisor, then that's absolutely fine. We would expect you to make contact with that supervisor prior to applying. And we will ask that supervisor after you've applied, would you be prepared to supervise this candidate? So it is important to get into a dialogue with that supervisor. But we will check with them if they are willing to supervise you. And if they're not, and you still get an offer on the DTP, then you can find another supervisor, or you can on another project, or you can write your own project. So there's a lot of different potential routes in. If we apply for multiple programs at Oxford, would it be considered self-plagiarism or cause other problems if our applications are similar? I don't think you can plagiarize yourself. So now that's fine. I would expect your applications to be similar but not identical. So I would expect you to tailor your core application to the different programs that you're applying for. Now there is a limit on the number of different programs you can apply to at one go at Oxford.
Not yet, in fact. At the moment, you can apply to as many as you want, but we wouldn't exactly recommend that. We do always say kind of focus on a very small number of applications, that your courses that really match what you're interested in. For next year, we will actually be introducing a limit on numbers of applications per person, which will be 2 talk courses or 3 research courses in a year.
Okay, oh, thank you. That's helpful. I thought that was coming in this year. So yes, you would want to tailor those applications for those departments, because if you don't, it will be very quickly picked up on by the assessors that you just used the same application. It doesn't strengthen your application to do that. If you just a few relatively minor tweaks to an application can really strengthen it. So do be careful about that one. Do you need certificates from GCSE A levels as well as transcripts from university? No, you don't. That's definitely not a condition of the offer. Is there a separate deadline for reference letters? I think we've covered that. Having a master's degree with a 2-2 makes you not eligible for the programme. The minimum requirement is a 2-1 at bachelor's. Master's isn't really part of our eligibility requirements. So it kind of depends what you got for your bachelor's degree and whether there were any extenuating circumstances that might have led you to get a 2-2 in your masters. I mean, most masters I don't think have that kind of 2-2 grading. They sort of have pass, merit, distinction, things like that. So, I mean, generally at masters, if you've passed it, you should be fine. But I don't think well, maybe I have seen the odd masters with a 2-1, 2-2, but it's not very common.
Yeah.
So yeah. Should the current master's degree be achieved in early September, is it possible to start the DTP on the 23rd of September? Well, your master's won't form a condition of offer. So the conditions are your bachelor's degree. That's the really critical one. So if you're currently doing a master's, we would want to see your master's certificate at the time at which it becomes available, but we would not make your acceptance onto the programme contingent on that master's, as long as your bachelor's fulfilled the minimum entry requirement. So as long as you have a 2-1 in bachelor's, the master's is a good to have. We'll need to know when you have it, but we wouldn't expect to have your master's certificate before you start. Is it okay to list a co-supervisor on a DTP project you're considering as a reviewer? No, we wouldn't, because again, that's a conflict of interest. So anyone that's assessing your application shouldn't be a potential supervisor or co-supervisor. Can I explain case projects? So I'm going to make this the last question. So we'll answer the other questions in the chat box. Case projects are very specific projects where you will work with an external partner. They will contribute £1,000 a year to your project costs. This usually goes into your research grant, your research and training support grant. And you will also carry out an internship with that partner. That could either be as part of your research project, or it could be something completely separate, but you would be based at the partner institution during that time. And that internship can be anything from 2 weeks to 18 months, literally. Or you can split that time up into 2-week segments all the way throughout. So the main thing is that you're collaborating with an external partner on your research project, and they are contributing funding to that project. And then there's a special agreement that's put into place for case projects, like a contract. And we would sort that out once it was agreed and once you started. So there's more information about case on our website, and also the NERC website has a whole page dedicated to case projects and what they are, what the eligibility criteria are, and who can be a partner on those. So I am going to wrap up my session now, and I'm going to hand over to Charlie, who you've already met, and he is going to walk you through the actual application form and answer any questions you might have about that. So thank you very much. Charlie, over to you.